are now going to start our lecture on attachment. Now, most child development textbooks will mix this in with the infancy section, but I think that attachment is the most important topic in child development, so I like to make it its own lecture and spend quite a bit of time on it. Mother love in infancy and childhood is as important for mental health as are vitamins and proteins for physical health. John Bowlby, 1953. Bowlby, as we will find out in a few minutes, is the founder of attachment theory. So what is attachment? Well, simply it's a bond between individuals characterized by a seeking of closeness or contact and a show of distress upon separation. Essentially, it's a bond, affection, a relationship. So it's, again, characterized by a seeking of closeness. You'll also hear this as proximity seeking. And you're upset when you're away from that person. So in this lecture, we'll be talking about the bond between a child and a parent or a caregiver, but an attachment can be between any two people. It's any relationship. So the origins of attachment theory. This is where it started, the early roots. Behaviorists viewed attachment, or the bond between baby and mother, as nothing more than a set of conditioned responses based on food. They associate food with the mother, so classical conditioning, and they get reinforced when they smile or cry, operant conditioning. So the bond between baby and mother, for the sake of this lecture, we're just going to say mother, but it could be any caregiver. It could be a father or an adopted parent or a grandparent or anybody. But for clarity, we're just going to say mother. Okay. So they believed that the bond between baby and mother was all just based on conditioning. Well, the evolutionary perspective said that children come into the world pre-programmed to form bonds because this helps them survive. Remember, the evolutionary perspective is all about what helped us survive as a species. So we already discussed Konrad Lorenz and his geese, and he talked about imprinting. You can kind of see that as a biological predisposition for attachment. Harlow, you've probably heard of Harlow before. He conducted experiments on rhesus monkeys to see if food or comfort was the primary driver of the bond between baby and mother. The behaviorist said it was because of the food. The baby gets food from mom, so baby bonds to mom. But Harlow's experiments on the monkeys found that the monkeys preferred comfort to food. And then we get to Bowlby, who we'll cover a lot more in a minute. He is the founder of modern attachment theory, and we're going to discuss him a lot more in depth. But first, I have another quest for you. I want you to look up Harlow's rhesus monkey experiment. Tell me about the method and the results. Also, tell me, would this study still be allowed today? So now let's get to John Bowlby. He used naturalistic observation, just like Darwin and some other theorists. He just observed and wrote down what he saw. He did not conduct experiments. He was heavily influenced by Freud. I told you Freud influenced everybody. And the part of Freud's theory that he liked was the fact that early childhood experiences affect the development of the personality. So Freud would look at adults and he would say something about how it must have been the relationship of your mother when you were a child. And Bowlby was fascinated by this. He took an evolutionary approach to his theory. He was definitely in the evolutionary perspective. In fact, he was in the science of ethology. This is the study of animal behavior or the study of human behavior from a biological perspective. So that's the frame in which he viewed this issue. And he thought that it was because of survival. A child with a secure bond to a parent or a mother is more likely to survive. And therefore that bond must be biologically wired in our brains. So his theory, he believed that the bond is based on care and responsiveness, not food, like the behaviorist said. He agreed more with Harlow that it's based on care and comfort. He thought that a baby's smile provokes positive reaction from adults, and that helps them ensure food, affection, and comfort. So a baby who can bond with a caregiver is more likely to get food and more likely to survive. He said that the bond with a caregiver can be either secure or insecure. A baby with a secure bond is more likely to survive than a child with an insecure bond. By secure bond, he meant having a responsive, affectionate parent who consistently meets the child's needs. The child can trust the caregiver to meet his or her needs completely. So there is complete trust from the baby to the caregiver. Bowlby believed that there was an attachment figure, one primary attachment figure, and this is usually the mother, but it doesn't have to be. But there tends to just be one person that the young baby really bonds to. And he came up with this idea of a secure base. The attachment figure provides a secure base, a safe place from which to explore. If you ever watch a young child in a new situation, they will explore a little, then run back to mom, usually touch or hug mom. After a moment of reassurance, they'll feel safe enough to go explore some more, perhaps going a little further, then they will run back to mom again. And they will do this behavior over and over again. So they're treating mom as like the safe base, and maybe like the games you used to play as a kid. Similar idea. He said that this forms an internal working model. So this is a cognitive framework comprising mental representations for understanding the world, self, and others. Essentially, it's the blueprint of how you view the world and future relationships. So if a baby learns that relationships are safe and loving, they will take that blueprint with them to a future relationship. Now, let's say someone had an insecure attachment as a baby. They learn that the person who is supposed to love them isn't always there for them. They take that into future relationships too. I love you, but you may leave me. I'm going to cling to you more tightly, which may cause you to leave and reinforce my internal working model. Bowlby said that the internal working model can change over time, but the first attachment provides the first blueprint. He also said there was a critical period for attachment. Remember, a critical period is a time when something has to happen or it won't happen at all. So he said this was between birth and 5 years old. If an attachment has not developed during this period, then the child will suffer from irreversible developmental consequences, such as reduced intelligence and increased aggression. Some children even now might be diagnosed with an attachment disorder, and it kind of goes along with what Bowlby was talking about here. The next person we're going to talk about is Mary Ainsworth. She was part of a research team that studied maternal deprivation. Maternal deprivation is like the mom being apart from the child, and this might be due to a prolonged stay in a hospital or maybe being put in an institution. And she said that this resulted in a persistent insecurity of the mother-child relationship. So she went to Uganda and did a study on mother-child interactions over the course of 9 months. She observed differences in the quality of attachment relationships, and she started to develop a classification system. And she moved on to Johns Hopkins, where she taught as a clinical psychologist and collaborated with Bowlby. So she worked alongside him. They did a longitudinal study and found that mothers who were sensitive and responsive to infants during the first 3 months had a more harmonious relationship with them at 9 to 12 months. So they found that mothers who really responded to babies' cries and really took care of them had a better relationship a year later. So she came up with an experiment called the strange situation. It was meant to examine the mother-infant relationship and help her classify attachments. So I have a video that shows you the strange situation. I'm not going to play it here because of copyright issues, but you can download the PowerPoint, and if it doesn't play here, you can follow this link and watch it there. And this shows you what the strange situation was. Essentially, they put the child in a room with a stranger, and they watch and see how the baby reacts when mom leaves the room and leaves baby with the stranger, and then how they react when mom comes back into the room. And that's really what they're focused on. Does baby cry when mom leaves? And does baby get comfort from mom when mom returns? So after her work with the strange situation test, Ainsworth was able to come up with 3 categories of attachment. The first is secure. She used the same term as Bowlby. So in the strange situation, the child cried when mom left and sought comfort when she returned. And when picked up, the child would mold to mom's body and be comforted pretty quickly. These mothers at home were the most sensitive and responsive to their infants. They found that 65% of infants had a secure attachment. These children are aware of their mom's whereabouts at all times, but they're confident in exploring and playing, and they use mom as a secure base. They're distressed when mom leaves, but they're confident mother will return, and they're comforted quickly after being distressed when mom comes back. The mother is sensitive to the calls and signals of distress from the baby and responds quickly. The mother follows baby-led play, and the mother adjusts her schedules to the baby's rhythms. The relationship is mutual and not dominated by the needs of the mother. The second style is insecure ambivalent. So ambivalent is like a love-hate relationship. So in a strange situation, the baby cried when mom left, sought contact when she returned, but would kind of also arch their back to push away from mom and avoid contact. So it's like they wanted to be comforted, but they didn't want to be comforted. At home, these mothers were insensitive or inconsistent. This is also sometimes called an insecure resistant attachment, and it happens in about 10% of infants. They show ambivalence toward the mother. The next is insecure avoidant. So in a strange situation, this child didn't cry when mom left and acted unaware and uninterested in her when she returned. It's like they didn't care whether or not mom is in the room or not. And at home, these mothers show rejection of the infants. And this happened in about 20% of infants. They don't prefer their mother to a stranger, and they avoid contact with their mother when they're reunited. A fourth attachment status was added later by Ainsworth's student, Mary Main, and it was called disorganized. So this was in about 5% of kids, and they act confused or dazed, they respond inconsistently, their moods change quickly, they might be resistant or avoidant. These children most likely have parents who are neglectful or abusive. So it's essentially the person who should be the source of comfort is the one causing the distress. I have another video for you to watch here. Please follow the link. It just is good for showing you the different reactions. It shows you a secure attachment, it shows you an ambivalent, and it shows you an avoidant. So I want you to watch it carefully and see if you can tell which style it is before they tell you. And make sure that you kind of understand the difference. Now, there is a caveat about this. It has been determined that child temperament can affect the way the child responds in the strange situation. So the strange situation might give us a clue about attachment, but it's not the whole story. So we have to look at other things, not just the strange situation test. So here's a chart that I want you to look at, and it kind of tells you the percentage of children that we think fall in each type of attachment, the child's general state of being, how the mother responds to the child, and the fulfillment of the child's needs. Why does the child act the way it does? So make sure you're very familiar with this chart, because on the exam I will be explaining or describing child behavior, and I'll be expecting you to be able to put it into one of these categories. Am I describing an ambivalent attachment, an avoidant attachment, or a secure attachment? So make sure you're very familiar with this chart. You might even want to print it out and look at it later. So we will talk about the stages of attachment in the next video.